Howdy, everybody. Before we kick off today's lesson, I just wanted to share with you all that we are going to be having a special night this July 1st, Wednesday night from 7 o'clock to 8:30. We're calling it a time to chill. We're giving students the opportunity to join together and hang out on our church property. We're going to have Kona Ice here serving everybody for free. We're going to have yard games and have just some fun hanging out. Now, the building will be closed except for the bathrooms, and we are going to require social distancing and things like that. For more of those details, you can look at our Instagram and Facebook post that has all the details, or your parents can look at the email that we sent out to tell you kind of what we're expecting. But this night is just an opportunity for us to kind of chill out and hang out as we go through this crazy season together. So I hope to see you guys at this little party we're having, this A Night to Chill. It's gonna be cool. I got a question for you. Have you ever been rolling through someone's social media feed or read about their story, maybe overheard a conversation amongst your friends about some cool event, some hangout, or some party that everyone went to, everyone was invited to, and everyone had fun at, except for you? Everyone was included, except for you. Well, that happened to me just recently. I had been invited to something, a fun party. But because of COVID, they had to restrict how many people were going to be able to be invited. So I was actually uninvited to this party. And as I was going through the social media feed of these individuals, I noticed that out of everyone who was invited, everyone was there except for me. I was the only one in the group that was uninvited. It made me think certain things. The first thing it made me think was this: what did I do? What did I do to get uninvited? I started to think, what did they do to get invited? I started to think, did I do something wrong? And then I started to feel like maybe I was something wrong. I felt unwanted, unliked. I felt unimportant and unwelcome. I felt left out and excluded. I felt awful, and I had this tension inside of me. I felt rejected. Whenever we're excluded from anything, whenever we're unwelcomed, whenever we feel like we don't belong, it brings all kinds of thoughts and feelings to mind. It makes us think we may have done something wrong, maybe think we are something wrong, and it doesn't feel very good. Anytime that we are left out, we can't help but immediately think this way and feel this way. I bring this up because, unfortunately, many people think, feel, even experience this kind of reception, whether they're around Christians or they're at church. They feel unwelcomed, like they don't belong, uninvited, as if they don't fit. I had a conversation recently with a teenager who said, every time I'm around Christians, I feel like they're inspecting to judge every word I have to say. And whenever I go to church, I immediately feel like every eye is zoomed in on me, as if I don't belong. I remember back when I was a teenager, I invited some of my friends to my church, and they were dressed different than I dressed going to church. And I remember as we walked in the door, Mike and David, I'd been trying to get them to go to church for a long time. Finally, on Easter Sunday, their parents allowed them to go to church with me. And as we start to walk in, the pastor stopped us, put his hand on my chest and said, I'm glad your friends are here, but they better not be dressed like that next week if they come back. I ask you, how do you think it made Mike and David feel? How do you think it made me feel? Feelings and experiences are powerful, and being unwelcomed, unwanted, and unimportant can be very, very challenging, very damaging. And unfortunately, many believe or feel or even experience that is what will happen whenever they're around Christians or whenever they go to church. The question is this: is that what they should expect? Is that what they should feel? Is that what they should think? Well, this week we're going to be looking at what Jesus has to say in our series, The Storyteller, when it comes to who really does belong and who is invited when it comes to the idea of church, being a Christian, heaven, things like that. So right now, run and grab your Bible or pull it up on your phone, open up to Luke chapter 14. And we're going to see what Jesus has to say about this. And he's going to tell us in a story about an invitation to a party. And let's see what Jesus has to say about this party and who really is invited and who belongs. Let's take a look. Now, as we look at Luke chapter 14, starting in verse 15, I just wanted to pull you back to the story I shared with you about the student and my friends as we prepare. Know that this shouldn't shock us, that often this is kind of how people feel whenever they run into Christians or they go to church. They feel marginalized, sidelined, like they don't belong. That's why here in our student ministry, we're always saying that Element Student Ministry is an exciting and safe place for people to belong, grow, and serve. We want to create an atmosphere where people can walk in the door as they are and immediately feel like they fit, that they can belong, that they are invited and they are welcome when they walk in the door. And this is how a church is supposed to function. This is how Christians are supposed to function. But historically, that's not necessarily how we functioned. As a matter of fact, we're going to see in the story today that exclusion factor, that uninvited, that you don't belong attitude was kind of systemic, mostly in the religious thinkers. They thought you had to look a certain way, live a certain way, be a certain way in order to be invited, in order to belong at the table with the Lord. And these religious leaders believed that if your reputation didn't match, if your routines didn't match their godly persona, you don't belong. You are out. You are ostracized. And that's the way the society functioned. That was 2,000 years ago. Maybe an essence of that is still active today. You must be godly to belong. You must be pure to walk through the doors. You must be completely righteous to hang around with me. You have to be impressive to be invited. Maybe that's true. Maybe some of us fall into the category that we believe that some people, maybe even some groups, do not belong. Because she did that, she can never be around us. Because he lives that way, he can never be around us. Because they choose to live that way, there's no way they can be around us. But is that really how this works? Are we the judge and the jury when it comes to who belongs at the table with the Lord? Well, Jesus is about ready to weigh in on this and let us know what God has to say about it. But I just wanted to give you some relief and some encouragement. Whether you're inside or outside of the church, and whether you have felt this way or feel this way, it's not unusual and it's not abnormal for us to feel, think, and experience these things. As humans, we're trying to figure out this whole God thing. And when you look at Christianity and the inclusiveness of Christianity, it can be quite impressive, exciting, and intimidating to know who belongs. I mean, a lot of people believe that if you don't behave exactly a certain way, you don't belong. If you don't believe exactly a certain way, you don't belong. If you don't do things exactly this way, you don't belong. And that can be very challenging, and it can create a lot of tension. But what's awesome is Jesus weighs in on this. Jesus weighs in on this. And you're going to see that these ideas of you have to impress to be invited, that you have to behave and do certain things a certain way to belong, they don't come from Jesus. They don't. As a matter of fact, Jesus is very clear in Luke 14, verses 15 through 24. exactly how God looks in when it comes to people, rebellious or religious, and who's invited to his party, who belongs at the table. So let's look. Now, because the passage is so long, I'm going to go through and paraphrase what happens in this passage. But I encourage you right now to pause the video, read those verses, and then let's start examining them. Yeah, now, go ahead and pause it. That's the pause move. Seriously, dude, pause the video. Luke 14, 15 through 24. Go. So as we pick up the scriptures, you'll realize that we're walking into the middle of a conversation that's already going on. Jesus has been sitting down with probably a large table of very religious people, probably even religious leaders. And as he's discussing what the kingdom of heaven looks like, the religious people are pressing on him and pushing on him about how perfect and pure and wholesome and holy people have to be to sit at that table. And in verses 12 through 13, you see Jesus say it's not about your holiness, it's more about your humility. Jesus gives them a story and says, hey, you guys would throw a dinner party for all the highfalutin people. You would invite your friends and your family and stuff like that. But Jesus says, in the kingdom, it's about humility and humbly inviting people in. And Jesus said, what would it look like if you brought in the ones that were downtrodden, the poor, the ones that have challenges? Well, those are the people you should invite to your table. Those are the kind of people that really matter. Just like all the high-end people, so too are the other side of the table. Well, Jesus says this and creates tension at the table. We know this because of the way that verse 15 moves us. You see them all sitting down with the tension of what Jesus just said about humility versus the holiness. And one of the guests in there says that he's feeling the tension. He says this, what a blessing it will be to be in attendance at the feast of the kingdom of God. He's kind of like, hey, let's break the tension in here. There's just too much going on. Hey, isn't it going to be awesome? The kingdom of heaven, when we all sit down and feast with God, it's going to be awesome. Just trying to break the tension. But what's crazy is this guy doesn't realize who he's talking to. He's trying to break the tension. And trying to break the tension, he just reminds everybody at the table, hey, it's going to be a fantastic feast in heaven when we all sit down with God and we take part in this holy meal. It's going to be so good. And obviously, this guy feels like he's definitely going to sit at the table because he's one of the best of the best. This is what the table is for. This is for the impressive people, the high-end people. That's who's going to be sitting at the table, right? That's the people. This is the Hollywood of their society. Maybe the Holywood of their society. Either way, this guy obviously assumes he's going to be sitting at the table. This is how it's set up. He really matters. And he's really feeling himself. So, hey, let's break the tension. It's going to be awesome in heaven. But Jesus doesn't let it go. Typical Jesus, he starts into his parable. And what Jesus has to say starts off just like any story you would expect. Jesus says this, a certain man was preparing a great banquet and invited many guests. And Jesus began at the time of the banquet. He set his servants to tell those who had been invited, come, for everything is now ready. This is exactly how a good story, would start off. You give the obvious thing. A man is setting up a banquet. He's got it all set. It's time to celebrate. There's a bunch of RSVPs for this party. Hey, servants, go out and get everybody. It's time to party. That's exactly how a story would start off. But remember, Jesus is giving us a parable. So obviously there's some type of twist, Jesus twist to it. And that's exactly what we get. Jesus says that the servants go out and they start telling everybody, all you people that RSVP'd for this banquet, it's time to party. But one by one, everybody who said, hey, I'm in, I'm part of this, I'm going to be there, starts to give excuses. The first person says, look, man, I bought some land and I got to go take a look at this land. I can't show up. What a terrible excuse. Who buys land without looking at it? They just have something they'd rather do. The next person, hey, I just bought a bunch of ox. I got to go see how well they really do. Seriously, you bought a bunch of animals that you haven't even inspected yet? What a terrible excuse. You just have something you'd rather do. The final guy seems to be righteous. He says, look, I just got married, dude. We're going partying. And the way he responds, it says, I absolutely am not coming. It's over. Tell him I've declined the reservation. Does that seem like it's righteous? He's saying, look, I've got family things I've got to deal with. I'm not going to the party. This story that started off with this beautiful banquet is now starting to fall apart because none of the guests are showing up. All these people who had RSVP'd now have excuses for not going. And let's be real, you look at the excuses, they're typical. I've got something I'd rather do. See, if it's important to us, we find reasons to go. If it's not, we find excuses to say no. And that's exactly what they were doing. I've got better things that I would rather do. Important things that you should understand and just deal with. Jesus continues the parable. When the servants come back, they start sharing with the master all of the excuses and reasons why people said they're not showing up. The response of the master is exactly what you would expect. If you set up this party and everybody who said they were showing up is not showing up, you would be mad. And that's exactly what happens. It says this, he was angered. So he says, go out quickly into the streets and into the alleys of the town and bring in the poor and the crippled and the blind and the lame. These people are the people now that I'm going to focus on. Bring all of these people from society that many people think shouldn't even be at the table. They have financial, they have physical, they have sociological challenges. And the master says, bring them to my table. Talk about a twist in your story. Talk about a challenge to these religious minds. Talk about changing up the guest list. Jesus says, I ain't stopping the party. God ain't stopping the party. The master's not stopping the party just because the RSVPs don't show up. I'm still holding the party. And this party's going to include everybody. And then he starts to enumerate all the kinds of people that are going to show up at this party. Now keep in mind, we're historically distant. We are socially distant from the time frame that this was written. But the different categories of people that are talked about here, in their society, they were on the lower end of the spectrum. One of the things that's awesome about being an American and being a Christian in America is we should have, and hopefully, moved past that we look down on people because of their social economical issues, their color of their skin, their history, their physical or even mental challenges that they deal with. But back then, those people were cast out. A vivid picture of the kingdom, though. Jesus says those are exactly the people. Those are exactly the people that I want at this table. I ain't changing up the party. I ain't changing up what we do, but the guest list is going to change. Go out and get them. And what are those people's response? They go to the party. They want to take part of the party. They come into the table. Talk about how overwhelming this was for them. How exciting this was for them. This is something they'd never experienced before. They belonged. They were invited. It's a beautiful picture. God is saying through this story, everyone is invited, everyone belongs. But it doesn't stop there. The passage keeps going. You read it. It says, the servant says, hey, look, we got all those people. We got the socioeconomical challenge, the physically challenged, the financially challenged people. We've got them all. There's still room at the table. What do we do? The master goes, well, go out on the street. Bring all them in too. Now we're talking about the beggars in the street. We're talking about the prostitutes in the street. We're talking about the morally bankrupt people. God says, go out, give them the invite too. And what do? Bam, they show up. Why? Because it's a party like they've never felt before. It's an experience they've never felt before. Societies look down on them. Religions look down on them. Everyone's looked down on them. But this master says, you belong at my table. I don't care where you've been. I don't even care where you are. I just care where you're going to be. Come on in. Have this party with me. How awesome is this? I wonder how uncomfortable it was at that table with all the Hollywoods sitting around. Jesus is saying, this is what the kingdom of heaven is like. It's full of a bunch of people that you wouldn't even have a dinner party with. That's what heaven is going to be like. And Jesus reminds them at the end of this story, all of the outcasts show up. None of the other people are going to be in that table. Talk about attention. Talk about getting everyone's attention. As that story concludes, I just want to pull a few things out and see how they might apply to our life and our situation. The first thing that's obvious from this passage is the fact that there's a lot of people that say, hey, I'm in. I've got my RSVP. But the moment we're called into action, the moment we're called to make a move towards God, we find all kinds of reasons not to show up. Well, I would go serve, but I gotta go do this. Yeah, I would be involved, but I gotta go do this. Yeah, I know that this is important, but I've got relational things that are much more important. And when it comes to the relationship with God, God says, no, your property, your livelihood, your relationships, they're not first. I'm first. It's a reminder to me, and maybe to you. When we give our lives to Jesus Christ, first and foremost in everything that is now important for us is what Jesus says. We're a Christian before anything else. We're a Christian before we're a student, a child, a male or female, liberal or conservative. We're a Christian first. And when we're a Christian first, everything else that filters through us will be infected and affected by Jesus. This newness of life, this new way of looking at ourselves and everybody else. The second thing, Jesus reminds us that there'll be people in heaven you didn't even expect to be there. There'll be people in heaven that you will be shocked to see maybe. Because heaven is not contingent or reliant upon other people. It's reliant on Jesus Christ. Jesus is pointing out the fact that it's not by your power that you get to this table, but by my invitation. Your only response, the only thing that matters in the whole equation to you is how you respond. Will you show up? That's the thing about Christianity, about how inclusive it is. It includes everybody. Everybody can go to heaven. And everybody goes the exact same way through Jesus Christ. We do nothing to earn it. He's already paid the bill. Cater's been paid. The room's been set up and prepared. We do nothing. Jesus does it. It's all through Jesus. It is inclusive of everybody, but it is exclusive. It is only through the invitation of Jesus Christ. It is about Jesus. We go through Jesus. Which brings us to the final thing. What do you do with Jesus? Right now, I'm sure there's a category that doesn't know what they're supposed to do with Jesus. They haven't accepted him into their life, and they have their reasons, and I'm sure that those reasons are partly intellectual. Maybe they're emotional. Maybe it's the reputation of other Christians that pushes you away. My encouragement to you is this. Please inspect Jesus. Please look deeper into Jesus. Look for the truth about Jesus. Go for the evidence about Jesus, not just people's experiences only. Look at what God has done to completely back up every claim about himself in Jesus Christ. Some avenues you can take are to talk with your parents. If you've got a trusted, true Christian friend in your life, press on them. ask questions. Connected to our student ministry, ask any of our youth workers, regardless of how you're connected to our church. Ask any of our youth workers. They'll help you navigate this terrain so that you make a informed decision when it comes to the invitation that Jesus has given. And finally, for those of you that have accepted the invitation, that you have confidence that you will be in the kingdom with Jesus forever, I have 3 thoughts quickly for you. The first one is this: look like Jesus. Look like Jesus. What you say, what you do, the way you behave. Look like Jesus. The next thing is this: live like Jesus. Go out as a living invitation to other people. Live your life in a way that reflects that of Jesus Christ. And then finally, serve like Jesus. Look for and pray for opportunities to be Jesus to other people. To go out and live in such a way that is so attractive, meeting people's needs with the love of Jesus Christ, that they're curious about Jesus, and you can share with them the invitation that you've accepted that is open to them when it comes to Jesus. Remember, in this story, we're reminded, when it comes to the invitation, everyone is invited because everyone belongs. I love you all. I hope you have a fantastic week. Have fun. Make wise choices. Toby.